all the material on the ESMAP site. And also after this session, we're gonna also share the all material and the recording with you, so you can also access and then take a look. And we're gonna have another session on June 2nd. It's mainly about the survey clinic, how we can design the groundwork, data work, and how we can actually design the study to answer to some of the questions that we have. So that's on June 2nd. So stay tuned, and then yeah, we're gonna work on it. We're gonna have another like advertisement shortly. So today I'm glad to have this webinar session. Jeff from the Infra VP Chief Economist Office, and also Anna, who's from the University of Maryland. And then so we work together, MTF team worked together with Jeff and Anna in Nepal, and they had a great idea how we can actually maximize the benefit of doing the survey in Nepal. So we also incorporate some of information and the question into survey. And then Anna and Jeff and Govinda did a data analysis and the writing a report and doing a fantastic research work. So I wanna invite both of colleagues and academia researcher to the webinar and then share their findings from the study. And also just furthermore, Anna can also share some of the kind of implication, especially this contingent valuation method and the willingness to pay kind of approach can be quite useful and then also quite practical via our operational work. So yeah, I want to invite Jeff and Anna for the presentation. Followed by the presentation, we're gonna have some discussion and also Q&A session accordingly. Okay.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Brian, for inviting me. I have about 20 minutes, right? Just to clarify how much time we have for this presentation.
Yeah, 15,
20 minutes.
I think Anna will share the presentation.
Exactly. So, hi everyone. My name is Yevgenis. I work in the Office of Infrastructure Economist. And I want to present a paper. Which I think someone is on.
That are a bit less
any chance to,
high quality, I would say. You see that this is much more expensive.
Is there any chance you can put yourself on mute? Thank you so much. So I want to present a paper, how valuable are improvements in residential electricity supply, evidence from Nepal, that I wrote together with Anna and Govinda, my former colleague at research department, where I started my official bank journey before moving to infrastructure. This paper has a long story, and this story is, you know, one of the best highlights of that story is that it demonstrates a very nice synergy, productive synergy between research team in the World Bank and the operational teams in the bank. And we're talking about several operational teams. So the story started from Jitang, who was practice manager for South Asia at that time, coming to me and said, look at Nepal, you know, it seems like Nepal is going to solve its long-standing power sharing crisis too. So I thought, oh wow, this is really interesting issue, because you know we immediately have a thought experiment here, and very much coincidentally around the same time, the MTF team started to launch one of its first MTF survey instruments in Nepal was chosen, and you know, we had a lot of conversations with Brian and his colleagues at Lisa Portal at that time, trying to see how we can best leverage and improve the survey instrument to take, you know, intellectual advantage of the situation that our crisis to be resolved, right? And the resulting experiment was very successful, and we came up with this paper that we managed to present it at various events with great success, and later publish it in academic output. Okay. So here is a quick presentation outline. What are the research questions and what are the answers to these research questions? A brief description of Nepal overshooting crisis. I intentionally will try to go short on that because I know the previous presentation went to talk about this in great length and detail, and I don't want to kind of steal or repeat the show which has already been running, and talk about research design and reiterate the results and the answers, right? So the first research question that we asked at that time is how much are Nepali households are willing to pay for reliable power supply, and the answer is quite a bit. So on average, based on our analysis, the Nepali households were willing to pay about 123 Nepalese rupees, which at that time was about $1 at the prevailing exchange rate per month, which is 65% of the actual average monthly bill. So this is a large sum for Nepalese. Unfortunately, there is another side to that, and the second part of the answer is not so much, because 26% of the household weren't willing to pay anything, if we believe them, of course, right? So even the average number tells quite a bit, this number hides significant differences across households. The second research question that we asked is what is the value of lost load borne by Nepali households during the load shedding crisis? And the answer to that question is very large. It's about as much as the cost of grid electricity service, which is, it depends on the technology. It ranges between 4.05 to 13 cents per kilowatt hours. This is a lot for Nepal, but very little for developed economies, where these numbers are an order of magnitude larger. Something happens to my computer. Okay, let's see. I hope it works. So there are large differences between value of load for load shedding versus unscheduled outages, and I will show you later that people don't seem to like, one versus another in greater scale. And so we continue for that. The final important question, does it pay off to improve residential power supply? And this question may sound silly because, a conventional answer from the practitioners is of course, right? But, our answer as economists is not really, because our value of lost load estimates are lower than the marginal cost of improving reliability of power supply, right? So even though at face value, it kind of always says it's a great idea to improve a residential power supply, economists think it from somewhat different lenses. We're saying, is it worth improving given, consumers' willingness to pay? And that's an important operational question that we always need to face when we try to think where is the right margin to which we need to invest in certain infrastructure projects, given, we have some competing priorities. Of course, if we don't have them, that's not really the answer. But on the other hand, yes, it does. If we think beyond direct benefits to households, meaning, if we take all social benefits to more reliable power supply, such as impacts on health, education, human development outcomes, state capacity, and so on and so forth, then of course this is very meaningful. Unfortunately, it's not something that we do in this particular study, right? So very quickly about the Nepal and reliability power supply. So South Asia is unfortunately one of the most problematic regions, along with Sub-Saharan Africa, where power supply is a major problem, and unfortunately Nepal at that point in time was outlier even for the South Asian economies. It's also one of the poorest countries in terms of electricity consumption. But at that point of time, demand for the country was growing. The demand for electricity was greatly outstripping supply, and that led to severe load shedding crisis. So what you can see from this particular graph, in the dry season, and that's kind of obvious for people who are familiar with Nepalese power system structure. It's intensely hydropower. In the dry season, we don't have a lot of hydro power available at that point of time. We can get significant load shedding, going from 15 hours a day in 2008, and persisting till 2016, until suddenly Nepal Electricity Authority eliminated load shedding in 2017. And there have been many reasons why it happened. There were shifting parts of load from industrial residential customers. NEA concluded at some point in time that load was badly mismanaged. There were some loss reduction initiatives taking place. Importantly, new generation capacity came in, and imports from India picked up. You know, interactions matter, of course, and that certainly helped. There was some evidence that consumer awareness also increased, and there was some progress made on demand side management. So, all in all, the scheduled power outages eliminated some of this. That said, unscheduled outages remained and probably still persist, given that Nepal's power infrastructure is quite dilapidated. So I would be very much surprised if the country can completely eliminate the power outages. However, unscheduled outages, you know, were on order of magnitude lower than the scheduled outages, load shedding. So how are we trying to attack the problem, and what are we trying to do from the analytical perspective? The key idea is very simple. We go and ask survey households after load shedding eliminated, do you still experience power outages at the time of the survey? How much did you experience power outages 1 year before? And would you be willing to pay a specified amount of money on the top of their monthly bill to avoid going back to the situation the year before? So in a sense, it's a not standard research design, because usually you ask people, how much would you willing to pay to improve the reliability of power supply? That's a very standard question. We actually, piggyback on the situation that the power outages have ended, and people had real experiences of having really bad situation. So this is a much stronger kind of incentive point than asking hypothetical question. What happens if things may hypothetically change? Right here, we have a very specific thing, and people still have very robust experience of kind of living on the power outages. And I will elaborate on this point later, but this is kind of important hook that we were able to successfully leverage to answer that question. We randomly chose amount out of several feasible values: 100, 200, 300, 400, and 500 Nepalese rupees, and these numbers were randomly assigned to different questionnaire survey respondents. And if the answer is no to any of these, then the respondents have to provide the best estimate. How much they're actually willing to pay if this is not 100, 200, 300, 400, and 500. Okay. So we had very good data, again, thanks to excellent efforts from the MTF survey team. This is one of the first data sets of that kind for 2017. We looked at 4,000 grid-connected households. They reported outages for typical and the worst months. We had information consumption, we had information whether or not household used power backup, which is typically an inverter or small-scale solar system. And we also had information on other household characteristics, such as their income, education, who is the head of the household, and so on and so forth. Importantly, we combined that data with information on zonal load shedding schedules reported by NEA, so we knew exactly where at which time the load shedding is happening, and which I think was critical for our econometric and statistical analysis, is that we had recovers of power outages and meticulously collected at substation level for 2016-17 to validate the recall, to validate what consumers had to say about the power outages, right? So we had information actual outages and what consumers are saying about it. So that kind of allows us to weed out wrong recall. So this is the distribution of monthly electricity consumption. We see that it's very little. People use about, on average, 1-2 kilowatts a day, which is consistent with the poorest economy. Very few use more than that. This is information on outages. We see in 2016, things started really bad. About 50% of the people didn't have electricity at this certain amount of time. In the beginning of the month, and then in December, it was done. Right. So within 1 year time, we went from terrible to fairly good situation in terms of scheduled outages. Unscheduled outages still remained at that point of time. So we had in typical months, there were about 40 unscheduled outages, of which, there was 30 hours without electricity. However, this is 10 times less than the scheduled outages, as you can see from here, right? So on scheduled outages in January, we had about 350 hours without electricity, right? Here we only had 30 hours, right?
Yeah.
So per month. So it's a big difference. And people were still experiencing some degree of outages, but on average, 3 hours per outage day, but it's not a big deal compared to magnitude and the scope of the crisis that the country was at that point of time. So this graph shows distribution of number of outages this month, but a year ago, and unsurprisingly, most of the households rightly said that they had a lot of outages. You can see this kind of large blue spike in the corner. So 37% of households reported 30 or more outages, which is reasonable. And if we compare what the respondents are saying about the number of outages and what actual data is telling us at substation level, we find a very, very strong positive correlation. It's about 60% R squared. Meaning that the survey was right. It doesn't seem like respondents were intentionally trying to cheat. I mean, this was very professionally done. So, I mean, it kind of gives a lot of credibility to our analysis. So, so now we will come back to original points, and we will see we'll find answer the question how much the respondents were willing to pay monthly, and we came out back to that estimate of 123 Nepalese rupees, which is about $1.1 a day, and 26% said zero. And those of 26% zero are more likely to be low income, poorly educated, using disposable batteries. I mean, people who are using disposable batteries are less likely, to say zero, right? Because using disposable batteries are costly. And that's not a good thing. So I will probably skip that slide. So the key results. So these are our key results. This is our estimates of the value loss load, and those range between. This is the cost side relative to the benefit side, right? So the cost side, value loss load, our benchmark is 5 to 15 Nepalese rupees per kilowatt hours. And we try to estimate value of loss load for unscheduled versus scheduled outages. Based on our estimates of the value of loss loads, the value of loss load is much higher for unscheduled outages. For obvious reasons, people don't like when electricity goes out of blue. They are willing to pay it more when there is some sort of warning. So we're talking about 2 times difference between unscheduled outages and scheduled outages. Again, I will skip that slide because it's just telling us, what determines the willingness to pay. We already said that. Now, the important bit is what happens is when we compare the estimates of the value of loss load to what we already calculated in the previous analysis. So we kind of trying to benchmark the estimated value of loss load estimates from the survey to the actual cost of electricity supply based on the intraday market in India, Nepal, and interconnected, right? And this varies between 4.5 to 13.5 cents, and that's much less than needed to meet wholesale demand. Right. So again, unfortunately, the residential willingness to pay alone is not, coming back to my original point, it's not sufficient to recover fully the necessity to invest to improving the power supply. Something else needs to accompany this, either greater industry willingness to pay, or some sort of indirect social benefits that will compensate additionally to direct cost analysis. Okay, so that's where I will stop, and I'll probably pass over to Anna.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your presentation, Yevgeny. So do you want to stop your share and I'll start mine?
It would be great. I just don't know how. Probably.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll start my share, and you guys forgive me. I'm not very good with Teams, and so I'm hoping that everything is going to work out okay. You will let me know if you can see this.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to put it in presentation mode and cross fingers that I'm not messing up something. Can you see it in presentation mode?
Good. Perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you. So my name is Anna Alberini. I'm a professor at the University of Maryland, and I'm a partner in crime with Yev and with Govinda. We go back a long time, and when there's an opportunity to engage in any sort of data collection and data analysis, I'm always happy to do it with them. I wanted to thank Yevgenis for doing such a great job with the presentation. I very much like the fact that he's presenting the sort of the glass half full and half empty. I prefer the full, half full glass, but that's a personal type of preferences. I really like, this kind of balanced presentation. And what I would like to do with you guys today is just offer some simple comments and some very simple remarks. So by now you heard Yevgenis, and so you know that we were particularly interested in estimating the value of loss load, and that we used stated preferences or contingent valuation, which I'm going to be commenting on, shortly. In principle, we could have also done it in another way. We could have tried to estimate the residential demand for electricity. So the way that you typically do it is collecting data about consumption of electricity, which if you can see my cursor, it would be the left-hand side of this regression. And then regress that on prices, on household income, on any sort of things that you think are going to be influencing the consumption of electricity. Ideally, you would like to do this with a panel data set based on actual meter readings. It would be even better to be able to do it with hourly type of data so that you can sort of figure out the substitution between one time of the day and another time of the day. And you typically need a variation in price in order to be able to estimate the demand function. So the variation in price is typically happens across places or over time if there are changes in the tariff structure that is applied by the government or by whatever utility is serving this particular area. Now, this is a personal interest of mine as part of my research agenda. I find that this is a lot of fun to do whenever you're dealing with a very particular type of tariff structure, when you have time of use or IBR. And if you guys have any strange, oh, hello?
No, did you reply?
I think there's somebody who,
Peter.
Oh.
yeah,
Peter,
can you, please mute.
Okay, so it's not my fault. I do hear voices in the background. Okay. Great, thank you. So this gets interesting whenever you have, unusual tariffs or not so simple to deal type of tariffs. And so if you guys have any strange tariffs that you want to share with me, I'll be happy to talk to you, perhaps, at the end of this about that. Now, this works great for people that are already connected. It doesn't work at all for people that are not connected yet because you cannot observe their consumption of electricity. It also doesn't work well, or it didn't work well for Nepal because there had been no variation in the tariffs in a long, long time. And so by the time we decided to do this, it was virtually impossible to do this. By the way, this is the way that you would try to calculate the value of loss load. If you've been able to estimate the demand function, you can try to look essentially at the consumer welfare, the consumer surplus that would be experienced in the presence of outages. Enter stated preferences and specifically contingent valuation, which is just one of the alternative methods that you can apply whenever you are talking about stated preferences. So with contingent valuation, you're asking people how much they would be willing to pay for something that they don't yet have. So a connection to the grid, increased reliability of the service, just like in our case in Nepal, and anything else that maybe doesn't exist yet or could be provided in a better form than it is right now. We call it stated because there's no observed transaction. People are telling us and we take it often at face value. We take whatever they're saying. One point that I would like to emphasize is that whenever we're really collecting information about willingness to pay, we must fix the quantity of the good that people have to value. So in the case of the Nepal paper that we're talking about, you can imagine, so remember what they were doing. They were supposed to tell us how much they would be willing to pay, to avoid going back to the worst situation that they were in the same month, but last year before the load shedding was suspended by the electricity authority. So you can imagine tracing out, some sort of a demand function for days without any service interruption. Clearly, the maximum number of days in a month would be 31. And clearly, this has a shape of a demand function. We kind of, declining marginal willingness to pay for each of these days. So this year, this is the level of days without interruption, which is clearly better than the one last year. And what we're really trying to find out is we're trying to estimate the area that I shaded in pink. That would be our willingness to pay. So that was the approach that was used in the Nepal paper. So I think I would like to talk briefly about the benefits and the pros and the cons of using stated preferences and contingent valuation in particular. So the pros are that this approach is really a true experiment. And so you can assign treatment, so you can assign scenarios, proposed cost amounts, propose the new version of the good, propose new levels of reliability of the service, propose new connection to the respondents completely at random, which greatly facilitates the statistical analysis. And importantly, because it's based on hypotheticals, you can get people to report a willingness to pay for something that doesn't yet exist, which is super important in the situation, for example, with new connection to the grid or something like that, or a level of reliability that these people really haven't seen. There are a lot of people that criticize contingent valuation. Perhaps, the most important type of criticism that they bring to the method is that you ask a hypothetical question, and so you get a hypothetical answer that doesn't really reflect what they really would be doing whenever they have a chance to actually get to action. Other things that we worry about are familiarity with the good. Now, in the case of Nepal, they were clearly very well acquainted with interruptions in the service and outage days. One problem perhaps was the exact recall of what was happening a year ago, but the fact that we deployed some sort of a data cleaning based on instrumenting, which is what we do in the paper, should have taken care of that. Other problems are that sometimes we think that we're conveying correctly the good that people are supposed to value, so the level of reliability that they're supposed to value, but maybe people don't understand it the way that we would like them to, or maybe we didn't do a very good job. And so people are replacing the good that we want to value with something of their own invention. And I don't mean that in a negative sense. I just mean that there is a discrepancy between what we want and what they're thinking. So possible solutions would be to quiz the respondents, to ask a lot of debriefing questions, to really check with the enumerators if the survey is being done in person. And then based on the information provided by these additional quizzes and tests and debriefing questions, you can sort of screen out responses that are deemed to be of low or questionable quality. And finally, one other concern that people have in the presence of contingent valuation is the possibility for strategic responses. So what are strategic responses? So with private goods, just like the connection to the electricity grid, you can imagine that perhaps the respondent might like to overstate their willingness to pay. So say that he's willing to pay a lot more, just because he's hoping that he will increase in this way the probability that this good is really supplied. On the other hand, you may also have the opposite incentive. So people could be understating the willingness to pay because they're afraid that actually they're going to have to pay for real. Or because they're hoping that perhaps, in this way, they're going to be increasing the likelihood that the good is going to be provided to them, the connection perhaps, or the reliability is going to be provided to them for free. Sometimes this kind of incentives are sort of, bundled together with a type of elicitation of willingness to pay that you decide to use in the survey. So with a single bounded type of question, which is how we started out the Nepal survey, would you be willing to pay a certain amount of rupees, yes or no? That should be relative, the strategic incentive should be relatively minimized. With double bounded, which means that you're following up, like, oh, wait a minute, you just said that you were willing to pay 100. Would you be willing to pay 120? That's already getting a little bit shady because people might be thinking that now you're negotiating with them or haggling with them. And so we typically deploy language like, oh, there's another estimate produced by another set of engineers that suggests that this would cost you 120. Would you still be willing to buy this particular good? Way back when, and we're talking about, the 1980s or the 1990s, people were using bidding games. So they would start at 100, and if you say yes, they'll ask you about 101. And then if you say yes, 102. And you can imagine that this was really getting the respondents irritated, annoyed, ready to throw the numerator out of the window or something like that. And it was really triggering the notion that you're really trying to negotiate with them. And then, of course, there's open-ended approaches, including payment card, which is effectively what we were using in the second part of the elicitation process in Nepal. So first we were asking a single-bounded question, and then we were asking an open-ended question. Keep in mind that with open-ended, the incentive to the respondent is always to understate their willingness to pay, much like you would when you're putting in an offer for a home. You're going to put in the minimum amount of money, not your true willingness to pay, that you think is going to get you the house. Same thing here. And of course, in Nepal, we were also dealing with culture and tradition. It's typical, apparently, for the Nepalese to always be haggling about the price of something. And so we think that they were probably underreporting their willingness to pay, exactly because they were expecting to negotiate or to engage in a process of this kind. So finally, let me get back to the point, and this is pretty much the last thing that I'm going to be saying, but let me get back to the point that I was talking about earlier. There's a lot of people that criticize stated preferences and contingent valuation because they think that if you're asking a hypothetical question, you will get a hypothetical answer. And so one important test for contingent valuation and for any work that the World Bank might be thinking of doing is to see if the responses to a contingent valuation surveys are actually predicting correctly the actual behavior. So there's a very nice paper by Kenneth Lee, Ted Miguel, and Catherine Wolfram that is, I believe, comes from a World Bank type of assignment, where they designed a randomized control trial in Kenya in 2014, where they offered connections to the grid at subsidized prices that were varied across participants. So some participants actually effectively would receive the connection for free because the subsidy was 100% of the actual price. The participants were given an 8-week window to accept or decline this particular offer. So the analysis finds that the connection rate, so the actual take-up of the offer was very, very, very low, much lower than that predicted by the authorities in Kenya. Companion contingent valuation surveys were also conducted. And what's kind of interesting is what you can see in the picture here, which comes from the original paper, but I doctored it up a little bit to erase a few things that were sort of, making the appearance a little bit difficult, to the reader or to the person in the audience. So this solid line, if you can see it, is representing the uptake. And as you can see, once you are offering the connection for free, pretty much everybody takes it. When you're not offering it for free, you can see that there's much, much lower uptake levels, as you can see from here. Now, this particular picture actually presents two different variants of the contingent valuation survey. In this variant right here, people were simply asked about their willingness to pay for a connection. And as you can see, there is a tendency to sort of, over-predict participation, like, the taking up, for any given level of the offer. But in the variant in which the respondents were given a 6-week window to decide, which is, fairly similar to the actual amount of time that were offered in the randomized control trial, you can see that actually the willingness to pay approach tracks the actual participation rate fairly well until we are at the very high amounts of money. So that's a very encouraging type of result, because it's suggesting that at least when the survey is really mimicking real life, and the constraints of real life as well as possible, it is possible for contingent valuation to do very well. As a final note, I would like to point out, and I also would like to point out, I am not an employee of the World Bank. I repeat, I am not an employee of the World Bank. And still, I'm always very impressed with the fact that the World Bank has a very good track record that shows that actually contingent valuation frequently predicts very well what people are really going to do. So in the back of my mind, I had this study that was done, back in the early 1990s. I guess it was published in 1995, and it was in a slightly different context. It was in the context of connection to the water supply network. The study uses a survey and then resurveys the same people and observes whether people were observed actually if people are really connecting to the water system after they were previously interviewed, offered the connection at different prices, and they were hypothetically saying, yes, I'm going to do it, no, I would do it. And it turns out that actually the survey, the earlier survey, predicts 91 is successful in predicting correctly 91% of the actual behavior by consumers. So that's a really, really good track record. So concluding, well, I'm going to skip this one, but concluding, when randomized controlled trials are not possible, or when it's impossible to observe variation in prices or to collect data about actual consumption of electricity and estimate the demand function, you can certainly deploy hypothetical type of methods like contingent valuation to value connections to the grid, higher reliability, the value of lost load, whatever you need to value. We talked about the pros and the cons of using stated preferences, but the cons can be overwhelmed by, can be overcome, more than overwhelmed, by designing the study really carefully, making the situation in which people have to tell you what they would be doing as close as possible to reality, and also with very careful data analysis and modeling. I think I've presented enough convincing evidence that the World Bank has done really well in terms of predicting behavior correctly based on stated preference surveys. And I'm going to stop right here. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much, Jeff and Anna, for the great presentation. Yeah. So as the next session, I wanna introduce the Tay, who currently working with the MTF team, and then who's working on the several research paper using the MTF data. So at ESMAP, we can hear all the benefit at the same time, pros and cons of the contingent valuation method. And then nowadays in the energy sector, we are really we try to understand the kind of the consumer behavior side, how they're gonna react to the certain policy that's gonna be given to them. So nowadays, many of the practitioners and also operation team, they try to adapt and they employ the kind of contingent valuation method. They want to understand the affordability of being connected to grid, or affordability to adopt the off-grid solar solution, or demand for the certain different types of energy solution. So at ESMAP, we are trying to work on the paper or the report to understand it, to go through various techniques to understand and estimate the demand for the certain technology and the energy solution. So one of the pillar in the report, we also try to look into the contingent valuation method. As Anna rightly pointed out, there are a lot of cons, and also in the survey, from the practical perspective, it's not easy. Hypothetical situation, we need to manage the expectation of respondent and so on. But we also fully understand that we should, if we want to employ the contingent valuation method, it should be carefully designed for the study. Well, survey preparation phase, it should be carefully designed. Data analysis and the modeling also be done quite carefully. So Tay has been working on it. So I want to have Tay as a discussion in this webinar, and then I want to hear from him about his thoughts and any suggestion. And anyone who are on the call and then who are not talking or speaking, then please mute yourself. All right, thank you. Over to you, Tay.
First of all, thank you for the presentation, Jeff and Anna. When I first did this paper as a PhD student, I found this paper very interesting and found the MTF data has a lot of useful information. And I'm glad that I can hear some more stories here about the paper. And so I would like to maybe address some points about the methodology. As Brian said, we were working on the report about the grid electricity affordability studies, and trying to look for what are the suitable methodologies, maybe from economics theory or models, and to apply in the practice or in the field works. And one of the issue of the previous econometrics or other methodology was those methodology could not apply, especially for the off-grid area, because they don't even have an option for connect the grid or not. And of course, as Anna said, if there is no price this contingent valuation can be very useful. And since there is no price and there's no connection choice in those areas, we found that this contingent valuation method could be useful to in practice way. And so maybe I can address some points. Maybe Anna can help to answer this point. So we're thinking maybe with this contingent evaluation method can apply to not only the grid connection. We can also apply for the solar off-grid solar adoptions or other mini grid adoptions. And since those cases are can be different from the grid connection, because for example, off-grid solar has different brands, different type of products, and of course, each product's different characteristic, different lifetime. So in those cases, or maybe in different cases for using the contingent valuation in general, do you have any like comments? Do you have any like things to address that you think we have to, when we actually implement this method, we have to be careful about it, or to have the correct result, to be unbiased from this, like maybe like wrong survey design or wrong way to train the enumerators. So that's one thing. And the other, the second thing is, so let's say we have a result from the contingent valuation method. Now we know the demand and willingness to pay. And what do you think as a extension we can provide, like maybe policy implications, or so at the end of the study, we have to provide some more guidelines or insights to the government or policy implications. So do you have any idea what are the things we can provide from this contingent evaluation method results? Yeah,
Was that a question for me or for Yevgeny?
Maybe I think Anna can answer these questions. So since you explained about the contingent valuation method.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I was thinking about the solar products. So you have a variety of different solar products, you know, that people could be adopting, ranging from Pico solar system to a full out, you know, solar system for your home and everything. It seems to me that in that particular situation, more than contingent valuation, you might want to explore the possibility of what we call discrete choice experiments. So you can ask people to examine 3 different products that are described by their ability to power the entire house, or their ability to power just a limited number of appliances, or maybe just to charge your phone, and come with different prices. And you could ask people which one they would buy. So that's going to come in handy whenever you're trying to figure out essentially the value that they're putting on each of these attributes. You know, so the attributes here would be the ability to serve the entire house, or the ability to power only specific appliances. And it can help you predict essentially the market share of people that would be adopting that particular system. That would be, if this is what you're interested in, you know, seeing whether people would be, which one of these, you know, solar products people would be using, maybe I would use that particular approach. In terms of the willingness to pay question, remember that in Yevgeny's presentation, he actually did offer some policy recommendations, you know, in terms, you know, coming from the Nepal study, that it looked like, you know, the willingness to pay for additional reliability wasn't enough to compare with the cost of for the Nepali authority, electricity authority, to ensure that. And so his recommendation would be that the authority really seeks to develop an electricity supply at cheaper cost. But I'm not sure if your question was really related to solar or to something else.
Oh, in general, it could be in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in general, that would be like, you know, the type of policy implication, like, you know, advising the authorities, the government, you know, the utility as to how much the public is willing to shoulder any sort of, you know, additional investment that can be done to improve the supply.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna and Jeff. And I want to also open the floor to the audience in the webinar. Whoever wanna ask a question or make a comment on the presentation, then or raise your hand in Teams or share your comments via chatting window. Then I think we can also discuss. And as I mentioned, I mean, we are still working on, and we are working on this report. And then as we discussed earlier, we want to share with you and also Jeff to take a look. And then maybe as I fully agree that for the off-grid solar, we had a lot of issues. It's not easy for sometimes they are not really familiar with these off-grid solar products. So we are asking like willingness to pay, but they don't know much about this product. So it's not easy for them to come up with the value for the certain product. And also, like in reality, we need to come up with some of like a survey instrument and so on, so we can also provide some support to the operation team. So that's the end goal. We try to come up with some methodology instrument, and we want to provide such a support to the practitioner and operation team who want to understand about the affordability or the demand of the certain energy technology. Okay, Kat, you want to chime in?
Brian, I just wanted to point out we have 2 questions on the chat. Can you see them, Mr. Hines, if you want to join? Or Anna, if you can see the questions, then you can just directly answer to the questions.
I can see the question in the chat, but I think that the best person to answer would be you guys, because this one is about the sampling of the population to make it representative of Nepal. And the next point that is made is, you know, thank you for referencing the Lee et al. Paper. In that line, were you able to find differences in willingness to pay in rural versus urban areas? The answer is yes, we did account for Kathmandu being, you know, different than the rest of the countries. But in terms of the sampling, I'm going to have to defer to the MTF team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for the sampling briefly, in order to get the national representative survey, in the survey design or the sampling design, randomness is the most important part, like a key issue. So not intentionally select a certain area or a certain region. What we did is that in Nepal, we look at the different the geographical or the topography based on the topography in Nepali statistical office. They share the sampling frame, and then we allocate a certain number, and then statistical office randomly select a EA or the enumeration area from the sampling frame, and then since we adopt the stratified random sampling approach, which means that we came up with a different basket. In order to increase the efficiency of the sample, we need to go with the stratified sampling. But we can also calculate the probability of selecting each of the EA. So we reflect the probability to come up with a sample weight in the first and the second stage. So by doing so, we can avoid any of the bias, and we can keep this randomness principle of the sampling. By doing so, we can get the national representative sample. So that's how we are doing. Also, we are working with the survey expert or the sampling expert in the bank and also outside of the bank. And then with such a consultation, we came up with a sampling strategy, and we come up with the final sample for the survey. So yeah, so it's a national representative, and then we came up with a sample size to be sufficient for the projection at the or the presentation estimation at the national, urban, rural, even at the at the topography or something like that level. What was that like a?
Geographical differences.
Yeah, geographical like stratification as well. Yeah, and one more question, I think. Yeah, so I mean, for the future work, I mean, we also got a lot of requests from the operation and the practitioners that they want to understand willingness to pay for the commercial customer. We call it nowadays like a PUE, productive use of energy. So whenever we are going to the rural area, our assumption of the presumption is that rural population is poor and they're living like remotely. So maybe they don't have much willingness to pay. And then for the mini grid side of the mini grid development, we try to identify the anchor customer. And then we want to understand how much they are willing to pay for the certain electricity service. Maybe residential customer, very low willingness to pay for the improved electricity service. Maybe Jeff, you also mentioned that maybe industrial customer or commercial customer, maybe they have a different level of the willingness to pay. So that's also something that we try to introduce to some of new countries that where we gonna work on. So maybe I think at some point we want
For the MTF, right?
Yeah, MTF. We're gonna do the MTF, but now this MTF they're using as a venue to collect other information or do some other assessment like Nepal. As we did. Now they want to do such a study, like affordability for the residential customer, affordability of the demand from the industrial, the commercial customer by doing the enterprise survey. In Nepal, we did an enterprise survey, but it wasn't. It was pretty challenging environment, I have to admit. But yeah, so that's what we try to do more. So probably we're gonna have more things to do in the collaboration on this topic. So we can also have another separate call on this topic if you guys have interest. I want to check if there's anybody on the call who wanna raise the comment or the question or any concern over the presentation. Okay, so it seems that it was clear. I know this is the first webinar at the MTF team on this topic, but I'm pretty sure once we have more data, and we've been working also with the Kenneth Lee and on the willingness to pay for the grid adoption and so on in 2016 and 2017 when he published the paper. So probably we can also work on some module together, and then once we have a sufficient the volume of the data coming in, then
Of course,
I
think we will be excited.
Yeah.
And again, I cannot speak for Anna, but everybody is excited.
Yeah, so yeah, I wanna leave it to you, and then as I mentioned earlier,
You can speak for me.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we're gonna share this draft report with both of you, and also once it's reviewed and then published, and I will also share with all of the participants of this webinar, and also we're gonna have another chance to go through some of this methodology together. Thank you so much for your time, great presentation, Jeff and Anna, and great discussion from Tay and everyone. Have a wonderful day, and then I will meet you guys in the next session on June 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, guys.
Bye. Take care.